Welcome to Bloom Today. Today we have a heartwarming show for you. We're discussing how do you belong when you've been abandoned.
Hi, I'm Paula Wallace, president of Bloom in the Dark, and this is
Ginny Priz, the single-handed serenity coach. Welcome to Bloom Today, where we talk about internal and external brokenness and how you can heal,
so that you can use the fertilizer of your past to bloom today. Welcome, everybody. Today we are talking about how do you belong when you've been abandoned.
Oh,
wow, that's a really difficult topic.
That's a really deep topic. I know many women who feel like they've been abandoned, not just from their parents and people close to them, but also from their friends, people who have come into their life even from a short time and then left after the promises have been made that they will stay and that they will be part of their lives. And life happens. Sometimes it's not a choice that people make to abandon, it's out of necessity.
Like they moved away, or
exactly.
Their families moved away, or jobs changed.
Exactly, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just when you're kids, I mean, you have no choice where you're going to live. You have to follow where your parents are going. So if your parents are moving, but as a child, that can feel like you are being left alone. I can remember crying and crying and crying as a child because my best friend, Shreya, was leaving. Oh, I love her. I still love her. And we had the best friend necklaces. Best on one side of the heart and the friend on the other side of the heart, and her parents were leaving. They were going to a different part of the Northeast, and I cried for hours in my bathroom. I just remember my mother sitting with me patiently for a time, and then she had to tell me there's a time when you have to just let it go and give it over.
So that would be especially difficult for military families, or families where there's a lot of job changing or having to go to different schools.
Sure. Making friends all over again and again and again and again, and then leaving those friends just as they feel like they've come to a comfortable place.
So is it harder, do you think, to have healthy attachments to people or to families if you have been hurt by being abandoned?
Oh, of course, because then once you've been hurt, you feel like, I don't want to get close to this next person just in case they hurt me. So you can kind of start to build up walls, don't you think?
Yeah, and I realize that as much as I have been hurt from feelings of abandonment, because I had other people take care of me from when I was 2 to 3 years old for 6 months. And so,
oh, wow, that's so young.
It was very young, and my parents weren't trying to do me harm. They were actually trying to make sure I was taken care of well. But circumstances had me need to have fostering family for that 6 months. And I didn't realize why I had such a hard time having healthy attachments to anybody, whether it was friends or my own family. I remember never feeling homesick the whole time I was growing up. If I went on a trip or if I was gone for 3 months or whatever,
You never had to grieve for what you were leaving behind.
Right, because I didn't have the attachments to feel the loss.
Oh, wow.
If that makes sense.
That's interesting. So you didn't attach yourself to a place necessarily, or to even your family.
No, I was protecting myself from the hurt of loss or abandonment, and didn't even realize the level that had impacted me until the last couple years. So this is quite the topic that we're tackling today.
Yeah, the effects can go so far into affecting all of our relationships moving forward, especially when when we felt like we've been abandoned at a young age.
Right. So I think for me, it ended up setting me more at risk for codependent relationships, because if I was going to be vulnerable and attached to anybody, it needed to be a really, 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 really tight attachment that would not believing that this was the one time that I wouldn't get abandoned, the one time that nobody would leave me behind.
And it's interesting you're talking about the codependent relationship and needing to be so close, and then there's other people that build up the walls and don't want to be close to anybody, and it's just in two sides of the coin, right? But they're both extremes, and neither of them are healthy. But there are different ways that people can react to those situations. Absolutely.
And I did both ends both extremes of that spectrum. And because of that, I realized that I had a real heart for reaching out to want to adopt or to care for children that didn't have family like that, which I haven't ever gotten to actually adopt, but boy, if God would put the pieces together, I would so love to have another little boy, because 3 of them is evidently not enough.
A boy? Not even a girl. You'd want another boy.
I would want another.
God bless you.
Another boy. So, but God says different stuff about abandonment and about belonging.
It's such a big topic, especially in the Bible, taking care of the widows and the orphans, specifically calling out the orphans. And I think there's something like 20 million abandoned children around the world just today.
Which is crazy when you think millions. I can't even wrap my brain around that when you're looking at most of them actually not having anybody that's family. Most of those are homeless as well. And that's just so overwhelming. But
think about, absolutely.
But we know that God really, really cares about them, and we know that He cares about us in the middle of that brokenness. So a piece of what we want to talk today was about how do we have a sense of belonging if the damage is there, if we have been deeply hurt, if we've been abandoned, especially as a child under any circumstances, or by family, by parents. How do we ever truly have a healthy sense of belonging?
Sure. How do we get there? How do we say, okay, I go from this lonely place to, you know what, I'm really not alone? Because I have this saying where you're never in the boat alone. You're always a party of 4. You, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are always in the boat. You're always together moving forward. And that was the one thing that really changed for me, this oppressive feeling of loneliness, to all of a sudden feeling like, okay, I'm part of a team and I belong somewhere. Even though I didn't have a deep story of abandonment in my life, there's always this feeling of you're alone in the world, and you have to face everyone else and who you're talking to. But when you're part of a team already, and you know that you loved and that you belong already, it makes things a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. And I realized God says that He'll never leave us or forsake us.
Absolutely.
Now, people may leave us, whether it's through death or through travel or by moving for whatever reason, or broken relationships, and bad things happen, and divorces happen, and parents are gone willfully or unintentionally, or sometimes it's just...
This world is broken.
And a lot of broken pieces.
It doesn't happen the way it's supposed to happen, or it was designed to happen, and that's okay, because God will never leave us or forsake us. In Deuteronomy 31:6, it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them," meaning your enemies, "for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." So do not be terrified that you are alone or lonely, or that there is no one to back you up, because He will never leave you or forsake you.
Which goes into the fact that nothing else can separate us from His love, right?
Yes.
Neither
height nor depth, right?
I realize that it feels like circumstances or people, especially if there's abuse or brokenness or abandonment, you feel like people or situations can separate you from that love or get in between you and God's love, except for the fact that Romans 8:39 says neither height nor depth, like you were saying, nor anything else in creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And sometimes our emotions aren't 100% in line.
Oh, that's for sure.
With the fact that He won't leave us or forsake us, that we can't be separated from His love, because I can be turned away from His love. I can be putting up my own walls to His love. But is His love still there?
Absolutely, 100%. If someone leaves, and we can feel as if we are, again, it's the same thing. I know I felt it, when I had friends that would leave for one reason or another. It was, it must be me. And I would go down into this sort of little cycle of shame and never turning or taking a while for me to turn around and remember God is there with me. And even though there are these emotions that are swirling around and the enemy wants me to believe all of these lies about it must be me or I'm a terrible person and I'm the cause of this, at the end of the day, it's a broken world. And no matter where I am, nothing is going to separate me from his love, even if it's my fault that the relationship is broken or not. Nothing is going to separate me from God's love.
So you're not unlovable just because you've been abandoned?
Absolutely not.
So I wasn't left alone without my family for that 6 months because I wasn't good enough or I wasn't lovable or there was something really wrong with me and nobody wanted me?
No.
But it's funny how that lie comes in.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's not funny at all. It's really sad.
Well, it's funny that everyone actually feels those same emotions and has those same thoughts. It's so eerily similar across the board, and to me that just says there's someone at work behind that, and it's not necessarily of us. We're not all built to be that way. We're built to be his children, whom he loves.
Right, so he says he's a good father, as the song tells us on a regular basis.
Over and over again.
Repeatedly. But it does say that God's the father to the fatherless. And so many times with the millions of children being raised in single-parent families and whatever, the big discussion about the loss of fathers and the loss of parents as a whole is so big, but the fact that we don't have a father, or that we have a father that wasn't there, or we have a father that we didn't connect to for whatever reason, does that leave us stranded, or does that give us actually a direct conduit to a new father?
Absolutely. Well, he adopts us.
Exactly.
He adopts us, absolutely. If we are physically fatherless in this world, we have a spiritual father in heaven that he will never leave or forsake you, and you cannot be separated from his love. He has chosen you. That's what I love about adoption, is that he actually chooses us and he brings us into his family. Psalm 68:5 says, "A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling." Amazing.
That is so cool.
This week we have a book called Abandonment to Forgiveness, and that is by Michelle Moore, who
do we get to meet her?
Is here today and is going to be sharing some of her story. And this has a lot of her story of abandonment to forgiveness, hence the title. And I'm excited to be able to introduce her to everyone because she's someone who has been a big part of my journey, especially in the writing of my book, Ditch the Drama. She is such a great encourager and speaker and wants everyone to be able to share their stories and really feels that it's so important that we do. So I would love to introduce you today, Michelle Moore.
Hey, can you give her a hand while I get her
I
chair?
will absolutely give her a hand. Michelle, thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness. Well, I always say I'm so busy that I always need another hand.
Perfect. Come on and sit down.
Yay! I didn't know I was going to get that today.
You know, I've got spares, but they don't work as well when they're just laying around.
Oh, okay. I understand.
Thanks for joining us in our little kitchen that we have here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled that you're here and you're sharing. Would you tell us a little bit about the book, first of all?
Yeah, so Abandonment to Forgiveness, I love this book because a couple of reasons. So one reason is because, of course, it shares a little bit of my story and it takes people from the pain and takes them to really just the winning part. You know, we all know with the Bible and with God's story that we're all winners. The end is written.
Absolutely.
We just have to receive that. And so, but forgiveness was such a big part and has been such a big part of my journey, and it has been impactful. It has completely transformed my life. And so that's why it's always so important to me to really talk and speak and help other people. You know, people are really hurting. And so it's like, okay, those that have hurt you most, you got to forgive. You know, I think one of the biggest things that I taught in a class once, and I speak about it in a few of my writing projects, is that as Christians, we want to believe that forgiveness is a choice. And it's not, it's a command.
Yes.
And so that to me is so big, you know. But very passionate about forgiveness and actually coming out with a 55 days of forgiveness text message program for people to help. But it's so important, you know, to just because of course the minute we decide we're going to forgive someone, the enemy comes in and, you know, does all different kinds of stuff, or at least tries to. And so that tool is to really help people step that out.
And you even have tools in the book as well. There's a Bible study in there and places to journal and answer questions to help help readers on the road to forgiveness as well.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, Bible studies are so great too because it helps you, leads you to look up the scriptures, learn what the word really says. Like we said as Christians, so many times we think, oh, well, once they've paid the price, I might then choose to forgive them. And, you know, God didn't say, well, once you've deemed them, you know, deserving of your forgiveness. No, it doesn't say that. In fact, an interesting part that I found that was kind of like an aha moment to me to help me to understand just personally how much God really thought of forgiveness and where things really were in the grand scheme of things was when, you know, it even says not to tithe if you have an issue with someone else. In the Bible, it talks about don't even tithe, go make peace, then come back. And so, you know, God wants there to be peace and forgiveness. So very important.
Absolutely. Before communion as well. So important.
Yes. Constantly. Well, we're talking about with the abandonment side of things.
Yeah.
That has been a big part of your story and why forgiveness is so important with your book saying abandonment to forgiveness. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the abandonment piece?
Sure. So by the time I was 5, my parents had married and divorced twice. And so from 5 to 14, almost 15, I had not seen my father but one time. I would usually speak with him once a year or maybe sometimes twice. He would call me at Christmas and my birthday, which is December and January. And so some summers I would get a call, but I remember sitting in my room even, I would write my father these long letters, you know, on notebook paper, you know, 7 or 8. And I remember that, of course, the times were different now. It wasn't, you know, free long distance calling like it is now. But, and my father, when he would call, the conversations might be about 5 minutes long, and then he'd start complaining about his phone bill. And so I would go up in my room and cry. You know, I just so badly wanted my father to be in my life. And it's so interesting because I have reflected back to that and thought about just as children, you know, how we just love our parents. And there's that sense of needing that, you know, that relationship. And so I can see, you know, so many times we've seen children that have been abused and they're in horrible situations, but yet they still want to be, you know, with their parents, and it's so unhealthy for them. But it goes back to they are their parents. And then at 14 and a half, my mother vanished. She changed her identity. Back then, it was before we really knew the term identity theft, but she had committed identity theft where she took on someone else's identity and virtually really just essentially vanished from the face of the earth.
Wow.
And was gone for nearly 18 years. And so I did not know if my mother was dead or alive. I'm an only child, and my mother had really been my best friend. I loved and adored my mother. I was very close with my mom.
I can't even imagine just disappearing, the not knowing.
Yeah.
Has to
the
be.
not knowing, when I see people in the news, that it really triggers for me, because when you see, like, you know, Natalie Holloway, when she became missing, I was pregnant with my second son. It was just gut-wrenching every time I see her mom, because I relate to that. You know, whenever a child or a parent or anyone is missing and people don't know, it's a trigger for me, because I really, I you know, can grieve with them, because I understand it's a pain that is just, you know, in a lot of ways unbearable.
Yeah.
I say that I was really living in my own hell. And so it was, because it was just the not knowing, like you said, Jenny. And so,
and then how did God come in and help to heal that and grow you into this new place of forgiveness?
Well, one night I was sitting on my sofa and I was crying. It had to do with a family situation where essentially I wasn't being treated like family with my own family. You know, my father remarried, has another daughter, and once again, just not being treated like family. You know, when you come for the holidays and they've already opened Christmas presents because, you know, well, they're a family. It's like, well, I thought I was family. So I've spent a lot of my life really trying to be family with people that really are family, but don't treat you like family because they see it differently, And so when really it shouldn't be that way. But so anyway, one night sitting on my sofa crying, my husband got up and left the room and to deal with something, and I was still sitting there, and in my spirit I just clearly heard God say to me, "You're not even grateful for what you have." And I was defiant. I'm just, lay it all out there. I was like, grateful for what? And God then proceeded to give me 3 visions and showed me 3 different areas of my life that I had been greatly blessed, where I personally had prayed for this or that. And so they were visions that were, I knew God had really worked specifically in one of them specifically, and the other 2, of course, he had worked. Yeah. And so I sat there and I thought, what am I doing? I could almost feel myself come out of myself and see myself sitting on the sofa. And I thought, what am I doing? I am, I'm crying over these 2 people, my mother and my father, and odds are they're not sitting on their sofas crying about what they had or hadn't missed and what they had or hadn't done, what they had or hadn't been in my life. And I was like, this is just absolute insanity.
Right, torturing yourself, essentially.
And just still grieving for what the enemy had stolen. And just, I have these 2 children, and they're healthy, and I can hear them laughing in the room. And, I got this great husband, and all of this, got a fantastic home, and, all of this stuff. And all things I had prayed for. And so, what happened is God proceeded, I declared that night things were going to change, did not recognize that forgiveness was part of my problem, that there was unforgiveness. But what God first did, God took me down a path marked forgiveness, but what happened was that path began with gratitude. And God started transforming me on the inside. I remember saying to a friend of mine, I'm different, something's different, I can't explain it, I'm different. And so it's so interesting because people around you will notice the changes, but I think you know them first.
Absolutely.
And so it's interesting because even my husband later, a few months later, would say, you are very different. And so, but it was just, holding on to so much pain and going, okay, yes, I've got this and I've got that but I still don't have my mom and my dad.
Yeah.
And so it was still that huge empty hole that I needed to really just accept. You can't make people love you. And you can't make people want to be with you. You can't make people want to be your mom or your children's grandmother or anything like that. You just can't make them do that. And so that's where gratitude came in. And you start down that path. And so it was gratitude. And then one day I woke up and was like, what is grace? What is grace? Like, what is grace? We hear it all the time. And I started asking people about grace. And then about a month later, it was mercy. It was like I had this thirst that I just had to find out what mercy really was and drill down to it, and started reading scriptures and asking people, I asked you about grace, well, what about mercy? What do you think mercy really, how do you see mercy? And then it was forgiveness. And I remember when God first showed me I was to write about this book, Abandonment to Forgiveness, and I was like, all I had was one word. And when I sat down was forgiveness. And so when I sat down to write, I remember just typing as fast as I could to try to as it was flowing on me. This was like, forgiveness, well, what am I going to write about with that? But it was right at the end of that journey. God's so funny. It was like right on time too. It was like, and cue the deer. It was like that. It was like, okay, so she's far enough along. Now we're going to have her write this book. And I'm not a violent person by any means, but when I sat down to write, I remember hurting so bad, wanting to throw the laptop across the room against the wall. But it was really, it just, I think I say I'm going to keep getting that master's degree the rest of my life in forgiveness because, it's always another level. God still shows you more.
And God is such a part of the process.
Oh,
with you through all of that.
The whole
showing
process.
you his love and showing you his mercy and grace and all of the blessings that he's given you and really allowing you to bloom, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. It's completely changed my life. It's completely transformed everything. Even the mother and Christmas morning. My husband talks more about Christmas morning when he talks about my changes. Because...
That you're a different person on Christmas morning?
Because I could go out and open presents with the kids and do all that, and then, go in the room, close the door, and be crying. And my husband come in going, I thought everything was great.
Yeah.
And me, going, are you kidding me? And so, because again, it's that deep hole that my mom and my father, it's Christmas and they're, you know,
and
they're
he's
in
healing,
other
and he's healing that for you.
Yeah, yeah. It goes back to gratitude and grace and mercy. And what it did to me is I spent so many years thinking, well, I don't care. Does not. I remember saying this for years, where I would say, it does not matter what the situation is. If a mother does not have her child, that is unacceptable. And so that's where grace and mercy came in.
Yeah.
And you start realizing that, you know, whatever the situations are, some people just aren't capable. Sure. And so, you know, I just have to give them grace.
Yes. Thank
and
God
start
that God
considering.
And thank God that God is capable of always being there and always giving that love over and over and over again. And Michelle, thank you so much. We want to award you the ex-victim of the week.
Oh.
Yay. We're so thankful that you came on and shared so much of your journey with us and how God came in and healed that for you and continues to heal that for you.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness.
So you get an ex-victim necklace, and because of our trademarks for chocolates and tissues.
Well, I don't know a single girl that won't want chocolates and tissues and jewelry.
Exactly.
To continue on your mission, on your journey, and to continue blooming, and every step of the way. And the ex-victim, of course, goes along with the shirt that Paula is wearing. But the symbol is an X with a small V, so that it's a big for X, meaning that no longer I was a victim, but I am no longer the victim.
And don't we have a charity about abandonment that we wanted to talk about? The Abandoned Children's Fund?
The Abandoned Children's Fund as well is found at abandonedchildrensfund.org. They have already given $6.6 million to abandoned kids around the world, and we are so thrilled for them to be on this mission along with God and have His heart for the orphans and the homeless and those people who have been abandoned, similar to what you've experienced, Michelle. You know, it's not just in the poor countries that we talk about abandoned children, and it's so easy to think that, oh, that happens elsewhere. That doesn't really happen here, but it does. It happens, unfortunately, in our own backyards, and we're just so thankful that God is able to come in and heal all of those places. So that thank you so much, so that we can use the fertilizer
of our past to bloom today.
A free PDF copy of the Bloom in the Dark book and a full list of Bloom Today's coaching tools can be found on bloomtodaytv.com. Then visit Bloom Today's Facebook group for deeper conversation.
Alpha.